Remember your 20s when confidence meant faking it through the bullshit? Midlife just isn't falling for that. In this episode of the Midlife Mud, we're ditching the pep talks and getting real about what confidence really looks like when life hits hard. And we're sharing a couple of our own stories too. So if midlife's got you second-guessing everything, pull up a chair.
Hey, I'm Morgan.
I'm Chris. Welcome to the Midlife Mud,
where we promise to bring the real shit, all the grit, and pretty much zero clue about how to deal with this crazy phase of life.
And by the way, because this is all about feeling less alone, what we want most is to connect with you.
Absolutely. So take a few seconds and visit themidlifemud.com and join our community.
And you'll stay up to date on all the dirt.
And even better, become a part of the conversation.
We can't wait to see you there. All right. Tighten those boots and let's get muddy.
All right, welcome to the mud. We are going to jump right in to our topic today. And I want to start a little bit differently. I want to ask you a question, Chris.
Ask me a question.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you as a person?
Jesus, that's a loaded question. Today, sitting in the chair that I'm sitting in, I would give myself like a 7.5.
That's pretty good.
But you know, confidence is one of those things that undulates up and down and up and down. One of the first things that I think about when you ask me that question is I think about that process. And I can remember like 7 years ago, I was like 15 years into my career and I had worked really hard to get into a position of leadership that really had not much to do with the technical like educational training that I had. And I had to work really, really hard, and one might say fake it, to get to that level. And I was wearing the suits and the shirts and the ties and, you know, going to board meetings and dinners and flying around the country and presenting in different presentations. And finally, the day came where a vice president invited me to a one-on-one meeting and presented me with this formal offer of the job that I had been working for so long. And in that moment, I felt like this satisfaction, like, oh my God, I finally did it.
Yeah.
The finish line.
How long did that feeling last?
It lasted for about a month. And then I realized basically it was the finish line on April 1st. And by April 30th, it felt like I had been put behind the starting line again. Because now I was learning this whole other thing. So my confidence went from really high, like maybe it was a 9. And then all of a sudden it was like at 1. So confidence really is a funny thing.
It is. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is that we're in what we call the messy middle of life, right? And I know for me, you just mentioned something about faking it. I think in my early adulthood, there was a lot of fake it till you make it. I knew I wasn't, quote, supposed to know everything, but I would just pretend like I knew enough to get by. And I think that works to an extent. The problem is now you get to the middle of your life and you really are like generally pretty competent, right? Like you can do a lot of things. You do know a lot of things. And yet, I don't know, maybe this ties into the sort of midlife crisis thing, which is like, what am I doing and who am I really? And do I feel like that person?
Yeah, it's interesting because you bring up this word competent, and I know that there are lots of things that I am really competent in. And there are things that I've practiced for a long time in my life. I am a good clinician and physical therapist. I'm good at relating with people. I'm good at having an intuition or a sense of where to go next with mainly like situations with people, interpersonal type of things. However, even though I'm really competent, that doesn't mean that I always am confident. So there's not always like this direct correlation between me being competent with something. Sometimes in those areas that I know I'm competent in, I don't feel confident.
And I think that's what the distinction that we want to make right now is that the kind of confidence we're really talking about here is confidence with a capital C. Confidence in yourself, not just your abilities, your competence. Because you're right, you can be pretty competent at something and still feel like a total imposter.
Right.
I want to kind of lead with a story of my own. it really did rock my confidence as a person. And I think a lot of women can identify with this. This was probably about 9 years ago. We were done having our 4 children. Our youngest was probably, I can't do math. She was like a toddler. And I went to my gynecologist for just a regular annual appointment. And he was basically like, you really have some major pelvic floor weakness. And, after 4 children, that makes sense. There's been a lot of strain, all this kind of stuff. And he's like, I'm surprised that you don't have any like symptoms of that. And I was like, well, what kind of symptoms would I have? He's like, oh, basically like peeing and pooping all over yourself. He's like, I'm going to recommend that you go to a physical therapist. And I left that appointment thinking, holy shit, my body is done. I don't know why. I don't know why I equated that with I am now like a worthless person. But somehow that's where my brain went. I was devastated. And I remember calling a friend, crying to her, and she said, well, Morgan, do you even have any symptoms of anything? No, I didn't, but I could. Like it was there. It was like I was on the verge of that. And now I had to go to this humiliating physical therapy where we were going to talk about it all the time and like do all these weird exercises. And truly, this led into, okay, I'm going to physical therapy. I'm going to restore my body. And I did that. I don't know if it really helped or not. And then it became, okay, my abdominal muscles are so stretched apart. I'm going to put them back together. I'm going to have cosmetic surgery to fix that. So I did that. And then it became, I gained all this weight because I was healing from the surgery and I still didn't know how to take care of it. So then it became, I'm going to get cut. Then I went into this major, health and nutrition program, which has been great, but I was tying so much of my worth to my body, my physical body. And it's only been recently that I've started to step back and say, I am not my body, and I don't have to put so much stock into that. I just think this is a really common thing, especially for women. And again, us being in middle age, then we launch into perimenopause and menopause. And, even for men, our joints and our body, it doesn't function the way that it always used to. We don't feel as confident, maybe. So that's kind of an example of the arc that I went through in terms of confidence.
Yeah. And it's funny because you bring up physical confidence. And I think that's something that for a lot of us creeps in the background. So we're in the pinnacle of beach season, at least in our climate in the US. So every year, this haunts me in my mind, the dad bod. I go to the beach, I take my shirt off, and I'm like, God, I look like a walrus. What? I'm just working on growing my tusks. And to some degree, I'm just working on really trying to accept that. And I went through this period a few years ago where I had that feeling like, oh my God, my body's getting older. I am not as attractive. I'm not as strong. And I started to do this insanity workout program obsessively to the point where I really caused myself an ankle injury that I still flares on me sometimes. And my impetus and drive for that was, again, to reach this finish line of feeling confident about my body. And I did make a lot of progress. I lost weight. I got a lot stronger. But the thing is, my driver was a little bit hollow. I was looking for this finish line, like, oh yeah, and then I'm going to be done with this. And my carrot to myself was to feel and look more attractive. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know, for me, it wasn't quite enough.
Yeah.
And so I reached a level of improvement and then sort of slipped backwards.
There's something there about going from the outside in. I think because our bodies are something that they're right there. Everybody can see it. You can't fake that. So there's something about getting that into the shape that you want, if you can, that then somehow gives you this shield of confidence. That's what we think. And maybe that's true to an extent. The issue is that it's not the confidence with a capital C.
Right.
It's a hollow confidence, and there's nothing coming from the inside out.
It's like paper mache. You sculpt the outside, but the inside's hollow.
Yeah.
So one of the differences now is I was at a patient's house the other day, and this sweet woman. She's like, "Oh, honey, do you want some lemonade?" Like, people try to give me stuff all the time. And it's great, but I'm on this thing and I'm trying to cut out sugar, but I said, "No, thank you." And she just would not stop. She gave me a big bag of Hershey Kisses, which is on my counter now. But one of the things that I said to the patient is, because they were like, "What are you doing? Like, you're not going to just have a little treat?" And I said, no, I do have treats, but I'm being intentional because I want to be able to climb mountains for as long as I can in my life. And that is making a choice based on an internal value that I have.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily because I'm looking to get rid of the dad bod.
It has nothing to do with what other people think.
Right.
And to my point about the physical therapy thing, for me, that wasn't even as much. I mean, nobody's going to know that I have a pelvic floor issue. Well, now they will, but nobody's going to know that. But somehow, as a woman, when you start to think about, okay, my job here is to have children, look amazing, juggle all the balls. Like, in our society, that's what we're supposed to do it all, right? And I had this like immediate, oh, this is one area where I'm starting to fail. And so now my worth as a person is tanked. I eventually grew out of that. And there's something about not allowing what everyone else is thinking to influence how I feel about myself.
Right.
You familiar with internal family systems?
Oh, yeah.
So internal family systems is sort of this something in the therapy world, a tool that sort of breaks everybody down into this system of you sort of have multiple parts to yourself, but you also have this core self. And there are these, what they call the 8 C's of the core self, which are confidence, calm, compassion, courage, creativity, clarity, curiosity, and connectedness. So when you are able to access all of those things, that's when you're really in touch with your core self. And the way that they define confidence, they have 3 different sort of factors. One is to maintain the ability to stay fully present in a situation and effectively handle or repair anything that happens. The second one is to have internalized the growth that comes from healing previous traumas and failures. And then to understand that life and learning includes making mistakes. That's real confidence. That's the confidence with a capital C, where you can tell yourself, you know what? This isn't going the way that I thought it was going to go or expected it to go or wanted it to go, but it's going to be okay somehow. I'll figure it out. That I'll figure it out sort of mentality, that's real confidence. Do you have an example of something that aligns with that?
Going back to my initial story about work and oftentimes being in these really big meetings and feeling, even though in many of those cases, I was actually the one either running the meeting or taking a lead role in the meeting. And I was working really hard to come across as confident. I would literally be on the verge of a panic attack. Shortness of breath, tightness in the chest, difficulty focusing and maintaining like a clear thought in a space where I wasn't really like receiving. I was just in projecting mode. You're not really listening because you're working so hard on how you're presenting yourself. And I had this moment the other day where I was on a big call with like 30 people at work, and I wasn't in a particular like role of leadership in that meeting or anything, but everybody's on their little Brady Bunch screen, on a Zoom call. So I was just kind of scrolling through and looking at people and their nonverbal and kind of where they were at, and then also listening to the conversation. And I had this moment where I kind of smiled and I felt like, oh, I kind of feel like I have a superpower right now. Because I felt very calm. I wasn't there trying to be anything or do anything except for just show up. And it was more about how I felt. I just felt very centered and very present. And I was able to process what was happening in the meeting and really be curious about that without being stuck in, what do people think of me? What do I want out of this? It's just a completely different shift.
Well, and it's so funny because when you think about, we're all sort of in the same boat. We've all been there where we've struggled with confidence and we've thought, oh God, am I sitting the right way? Am I like, should I cross my legs this way? Or should I like sit up straighter? Or do I need to say something differently? And the funny thing is that when we're doing that, we're not there. right? And if everybody else is doing that, we're all just in our own heads.
Oh, I know.
And so what are we really doing?
Well, and I think that was the superpower, quote unquote, moment for me, was to realize it was almost like I was seeing the code underneath.
Yeah, it's like viewing the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly.
And the irony is that nobody, when everybody's so, it's like teenagers, how they all think the whole world is looking at them all the time. Like nobody gives a shit. Nobody's looking at you. Because we're all thinking about ourselves.
I actually tell myself that sometimes, like, Chris, nobody really fucking cares.
No, they're not paying attention. They're not.
Care.
Right. And so you go on with your bad self.
Right. Just do your thing.
Do your thing. So that's the question. When we're in this messy middle of adulthood, how do we reach a point? Like, I feel like I personally am sort of emerging into a new space in terms of confidence.
Yeah.
And it's been a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And there are still plenty of things I don't feel confident about. But I think that that capital C kind of confidence is really growing in me. Is there anything that you feel like you're doing that's gotten you there or that you have done?
Well, in the internal family systems model, there's also this concept that one of the parts of people is something called the managers. And the managers are very well-meaning, but they end up being sort of a buffer or a layer between your core self and the outside world. And sometimes they get a little bit overbearing. And the managers are the ones that tell me, fake it till I make it.
Mm-hmm.
Put on the suit. Think about what you need to say to make people feel like you're...
Who you want them to think you are.
Yeah, exactly. So that you can get to whatever you want. Versus taking that layer off and just showing up as more of the core self. I love the word calm in Confidence with a Big C because that is what it is for me a lot. When I feel true confidence, there is a calmness associated with that. And one of the very simple practices is when I start to feel freaked out, the first thing I do is just try to calm down. And sometimes I'm just sitting there breathing. I try to just calm down, slow down, and realize there's usually not a crisis going on.
Do you feel like there was a moment, though, or a time in your life where the switch started to happen?
Yeah, I think it's just when the wheels came off the bus for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to literally hit pause. My relationships with my children fell apart. My work life fell apart. My home life kind of fell apart. And the core theme of all of that was I was just basically running scared, just compensating. And really in doing that, I was denying who I was. So that moment where I had to basically hit pause for a period in my life and then start to rebuild,
Mm-hmm.
there was a symbolism in that for me because every time I took a step forward in that life, I've tried to be very intentional about, okay, I'm laying a foundation here. What do I want it to be like?
That was all rooted in your core self. Instead of going outside in, you were going inside out.
Right.
With my coaching clients, this is a common theme that comes up. This idea of, well, I just don't feel confident. And I have been there too. And it's so interesting to me because, again, back to the midlife crisis kind of thing. I don't like that. I feel like that's a misnomer. What if we reframe that and think of it as this opportunity? I think it is a normal time for us to start evaluating, am I living from the inside out? Or am I living from the outside in? And I think often we spend all this time faking it till we make it in young adulthood and we never switch gears. And then all of a sudden we go, wait a minute, what do I want? Who am I?
Right.
What's the life that I really want to have here? And how do I want to show up? I'm tired of thinking about every little thing that I do or say or, micromanaging myself so that I come off a certain way. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of energy. Sometimes it's less comfortable. I'm finding it gets more comfortable with time and practice, but to just show up as who you are instead of trying to always manage this veneer on top.
I like that veneer. That's exactly what it is. A lot of people don't even know what's under it. They're not even aware.
I remember one afternoon I was in this workshop and the leader of the workshop handed me a deck of 3x5 index cards with big black Sharpie single words: love, understanding, trust, compassion, all of these different words. And not all of them were positive. There was a whole range, and said, okay, pick through those 60 cards and pick the top 6 that represent who you are at your core self. And I didn't know how to do it. It was a really hard exercise. And I felt like, I didn't feel confident, right? I felt like, oh my God, I'm in my 40s and I can't pick out 6 flashcards. What's wrong with me? And it was a very shaking activity for me. The next step of that story that was like a really big light bulb moment for me was that the cards that I picked were not consistent with how I was showing up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was like, well, wait, I know I'm this person, but I'm not doing that.
Amen. That's where the crisis comes in, quote unquote. There is so much dissonance that comes with that. Even if you're not even aware of it, it is humming in the background.
And you mentioned this thing about opportunity, and I think that's what it is. And it's not as if there's one opportunity. If you miss it, you're fucked.
No, trust me, it'll show up plenty of times.
There's opportunities all the time. And it seems to me, just observationally, that people either stop and think about like taking the opportunity in a different direction or double down.
Yeah. When you double down, you got to work even harder because now you're sort of semi-aware and you're like, oh shit, I got to ignore that.
Right.
So now you've got to put the energy into ignoring it also.
Yep.
Which is a recipe for total fucking burnout. Like, we wonder why we're all so stressed out. Well, guess what? This is why. Yes, there's a ton of bullshit going on in the world also that contributes to that. But you know what? If you have that sort of inner capital C confidence, truly, it'll change your whole experience of the world.
I was having a conversation recently with a man in his 80s who has been driven his whole life and owned this successful company and has all of these material things and assets. And he looked at me and said, don't do that. He basically said, I'm 81 now and I don't really care about any of that stuff with work. It just isn't important. And now I'm trying to figure out how to spend my last few years in meaningful ways. And it's about spending time with people. And I just thought, damn it, that's it.
Why don't we know that?
I don't know.
Like, why don't we just come out knowing that? Another thing I wanted to talk about is sort of this relationship, if there is one, and I'm curious what you think, between confidence and uncertainty.
I think that confidence involves being okay with uncertainty. And it's funny because I didn't believe that for a long time. I thought confidence was being certain.
I know. That's what's so funny. Well, and that's what I think the fake it till you make it kind of the paper mache confidence is all about.
I know, it's true. It's really interesting if I think about the definition of confidence that you shared, confidence with a big C. There's a lot there about fluidity and just being able to meet things where they are. Just accept what comes and not try to control it.
Yeah.
And not try to predict it. And there's a lot of uncertainty in doing it.
Yeah. Real confidence is not this big, loud, showy thing.
Right.
I think of it as like an ability to sort of just self-nurture and
soothe.
Yeah. That whole idea of it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And believing yourself. So, how do we tap into that more? How do we shift into that place more? And I think a lot of it has to do with being willing to explore underneath that veneer.
There was a moment a few weeks ago, and basically some software at work changed, and I had no idea how to do the workflow, right? And I didn't take the training that I was supposed to take. And so what happened was for about 2 weeks, I was doing it wrong. And I generated all these notes that were wrong. And the quality people came to me. They copied like my boss and everything. And you're not doing this right and so on and so forth. And I remember sitting in my car reading the email. And I felt the old familiar flood starting to come. Oh my God, how am I going to fix this, quote unquote? And then I was aware of that. And I took some deep breaths and just sat there for a minute and then accessed a calmer spot and just sent an email and said, I took accountability for not looking at the training close enough and said, yep, I did all these wrong. And by the way, the one that you sent me is not the only one. There's going to be like 25 more because I didn't understand the workflow or do it right. And so I'll work with so-and-so to fix it. That's it. Done. I would have let that ruin a month of my life 10 years ago. Seriously.
Yeah.
And not only that, though, one of the things that was really interesting is even my supervisor made a comment like, that was amazing how you dealt with that.
Yeah. You don't see that every day. And I like what you're pointing out there, which is that a confident person doesn't always get it right. And a confident person takes accountability right out of the gate. Everybody knows, like, has that one person in their life that they're like, damn, why they're so confident. What is it about that person? You know, maybe that's one way to explore confidence a little bit more, is to really pay attention. That person that you're like, there's just that something that they've got. Why is it that they walk into a room and everybody's like, God, pay attention to what they're doing and how they're being. And I'm not saying emulate that necessarily, but if you can start to connect the dots of, I noticed that they don't like sit around and go, damn it, I fucked up. You know, that's not what they do.
No.
So I don't know. It's not that they get it right. It's not that they're certain. It's not that they have anything that you don't.
No.
All right. What's the bottom line here? What are the micronutrients?
I'm okay with my dad bod.
Okay.
But the reason that I'm working on changing my body is in line with the fact that I want to be active on this earth for as long as I can in my life. And to do that, I need to keep it in shape. That's my driver now. And if I can do all those things and I still have a dad bod, okay.
Yeah, there's something about living from who I really am outward.
Yeah.
And being okay when I don't know. Being okay with uncertainty. That is everywhere right now.
I'm going to go a step further and say that more times than not, I'm coming to believe that uncertainty is a good thing because it allows opportunity. And for a long time in life, I thought of that as, oh my God, if I'm uncertain, bad things can happen. Well, that's true, but good things can happen too.
Yeah, I think uncertainty can really, if you allow it to, it can really spark that curiosity.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder what's going to happen instead of, oh my God, what's going to happen?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
It's a reframe.
It's a reframe.
I also think it's important that a lot of us sit around and wait for confidence to show up before we start doing something that we want to do. And I'm going to just put out there that confidence is not a prerequisite for taking meaningful action towards something that you want. Do it anyway.
Yeah.
And then this messy middle midlife crisis thing, I'm going to think of it as more of an opportunity to just sort of reevaluate, who am I? What do I want? And then really work on embracing that confidence with a capital C.
That's good.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us. But don't be shy. If you want to be a part of the Muddy community and continue the conversation, then you can do so at themidlifemud.com/join.
That's themidlifemud.com/join.
See you on the flip side.
In the mud. Thanks for being with us in the mud today.
If you liked this episode, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the show. This is going to make sure you never miss an episode, and it's going to help us grow our Muddy community, which would mean the world to us.
See you next time in the mud.